It's March 2015. You're working for the 36th District Court and removing belongings from a townhouse on Detroit's Lower East Side. You take out the freezer and open it. Nothing can prepare you for what's waiting inside. This is just a quick heads up before I go any further. This case is particularly disturbing as it details the murder and torture of two young children. Viewer discretion is advised. Mitchelle Blair, born the 10th of May 1979, lived in Detroit's East Side alongside her four children, including Stephen Barry and Stoney Blair, the two middle kids from the four. Everything seemed fine-ish from the outside. Blair projected an image on Facebook of a perfect family and that she was a loving mother, posting statuses on her Facebook writing, "Loyal to my babies," and posting a picture with the message, "There is no greater blessing than being called mum." Putting on a front here is putting it lightly. Blair homeschooled her four children, which would play a huge factor in events down the line, as it gave her and her family immunity from the outside world almost. They weren't due to be anywhere or see anyone at any time. No one would know if they were to vanish into thin air. Surely the dads of the children would notice if they vanished into thin air. No? Stephen Barry, the father of Stephen Barry, and Alexandra J. Dorsey were as deadbeat as they come. Both of them were virtually non-existent in either of their children's lives. Both men say that they wanted to see their children, but were forbidden to, by Blair. They were told they were with their great aunt. Let's be real here, if you wanted to see your kids bad enough, you'd make sure you'd seen your kids. No lame excuse like that would be enough to warrant not seeing them, and if they cared even in the slightest, they'd realise something was up after you'd not seen or heard from them in a year. They're your fucking kids. Despite what Blair's Facebook profile suggested, the family picture wasn't as perfect as she portrayed. Behind the scenes, Mitchelle Blair abused all four of her children. Blair's eldest daughter stated times where she and her surviving brother had been beaten with extension cords, pieces of wood, and burned with a clothing iron. She also choked and threw boiling water over her children. Blair was investigated by the state over the suspicion of child abuse in 2002 and 2005. However, counselling was the only outcome. Shockingly enough, the children's great aunt, Angela Gordon, was a child abuse investigator for the Detroit Police Department for 26 years, so how on earth did she not know what was going on so close to home? She did, just not to the full extent, and when she told Mitchelle to take better care of her kids, she was cut off from the family, completely. The extent of the abuse increased in severity, and eventually the continuous abuse got all too much. Michelle's youngest son would tell her that he was being sexually abused by his older brother. As a punishment, plastic bags were put over the 9-year-old's head until he passed out. Mitchelle would then slap him until he regained consciousness. She would then wrap a belt around Stephen's neck and pick him up in the air with it, strangling him. He was made to drink Windex and boiling water was poured on his genitals. Stephen vomited after the most recent abuse at the hands of his mother and died shortly after, just 9 years old, in the most inhumane, disgusting way possible, at the hands of his own mother too. His tiny body was then wrapped up in his favourite blanket and placed in the freezer. Almost a whole year later, Stoney would have the same fate as her brother. On the 25th of May 2013, Stoney, like her brother before, was punished for allegedly sexually abusing her two younger brothers. Blair strangled her using a black t-shirt, then choked her to death using a black bin bag.
You said you killed her by putting a grocery bag over her head?
Yes, that day, Maddie would tell me different things because she was doing this to him for years, and I did not know that. You get what I'm saying? And I didn't find out till 9 months later. She had started with Stephen. She ruined my son, okay? She started with Stephen before he even started. So, yes, I put a bag over her head, but it got worse that day. Yes, I did. It got worse that day because Matthew would tell me how she would take her pad, her menstrual pad, and squeeze her blood out in his mouth, okay? And it was over with after that. It was over with.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
Okay. It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all.
Mitchelle Blair would later state that she didn't actually mean to kill 9-year-old Stephen, only to punish him, despite putting him through hell and back. Blair herself was sexually abused as a youth. When she told her mother about what had happened to her, she told her, "It's over with. What do you want me to do about it?" Blair's abuser wasn't brought to justice, and so, when her younger son came to her years later about his siblings abusing him, Blair refused to let it go in the same way. She would never let them suffer the same way she did.
I mean, sexual abuse?
If that's what happened?
That definitely did happen to me. That's why I know exactly how would have grew up. I told my mother what happened to me, and the only thing she said was, "It's over with, so what the you want me to do about it?" What do you mean what I want you to do? You get what I'm saying? So all I could do is go back and sit in my room and just sit there and look stupid. I'm a kid, and I'm just telling you what happened to me. You didn't do about it. And plus, I still had to see the person coming in and out my house. You still friends with that person.
Blair's claims of her children sexually assaulting each other leaves many skeptical as this being the motive for their murder. Perhaps it's a bit too coincidental. After being abused herself, her children would follow the same fate. Many believe it is PTSD from her own past, creating a false narrative that she felt she had to act on. The truth is, we'll never really know. Mitchelle even called the police herself, sometime before she killed her 2 children. She said that she had a friend whose older children had sexually assaulted a younger child. She wanted to know what would happen to the perpetrators. When she realised that all the children would be taken from the home, Mitchelle ended the conversation. Both Stoney and Stephen lay undiscovered in the freezer, with Blair relying on help from her 17-year-old daughter to put the bodies in there. Nearly 2 years have passed since Stoney's body was placed in the freezer, and nearly 3 since Stephen's. Nobody's thought a thing. Nothing's wrong. Neither of their fathers thought, "Let's see our kids are good," no auntie reaching out, and of course, perhaps most instrumentally, no school. Since they were homeschooled, this is what allowed these kids to disappear with no questions so easily. Neighbours did ask about the children. Blair told them they were at their great aunt's. Mitchelle Blair was evicted from her home on the 24th of March 2015 after falling behind in rent and being over $2,000 in debt. She came to her family and friends for money, which they advised her to go get a job or go back to school. She didn't do either and was eventually evicted. After the removal team opened the freezer and spotted the first body, they phoned the police, who would discover a second body underneath. A neighbour quickly alerted the police to the location of Blair, who was at a nearby neighbour's house alongside her 2 other children. She was taken in for questioning and subsequently arrested. After being taken into the morgue, it took over 3 days for both of the bodies to fully defrost and an autopsy to finally be performed to identify the kids. In the Wayne County Circuit Court, Mitchelle Blair confessed to the murders, calling her children demons and detailing the abuse that they put her youngest son through. She told the court that she came home in August 2012 to see her son simulating sexual activity using dolls, which she confessed his older brother was doing to him. This led to Blair eventually torturing her young son, Stephen, to death over a 2-week period, which she repeatedly stated was an accident. Stoney's death followed 9 months after, in a similar grim manner that I mentioned previously, for the exact same reason, apparent sexual abuse. Unlike Stephen, she made it sure that the court knew. This time, she meant to kill her.
You meant to kill her?
I definitely meant to kill her.
Okay. It wasn't an accident?
No, not at all. If I had a chance to do it again, I would.
When you went and got the grocery bag and suffocated her, that was your intent?
Yes.
Both of the kids' parents would appear in court. Alexander J. Dorsey, then 35 and the father of Stoney, and Stephen Berry, the father of Stephen Berry. "You all was never there for them," Blair said, facing Dorsey and the relatives behind him. "How many birthdays did you miss? His ex-girlfriend did more for them than any of y'all." The fathers were tens of thousands of dollars behind in child support, Dorsey being due $39,000 and Berry $10,000. Both of the children were adopted shortly after the trial. Given their actions and failure to intervene with the years of abuse before it was too late, it's clear to see why. The oldest surviving daughter has graduated high school and is planning to attend college. I'm over the moon to know that despite the horrible ordeal these kids went through, they're doing good for themselves and leading normal lives. She showed zero remorse in court. She was emotionless, stating that what she did was just unusual. She later even stated that she'd do it again. Mitchelle will spend the rest of her life in prison for first degree and felony murder, both carrying 2 life sentences. This, however, wouldn't be Blair's last time in court. She would be back in front of a judge, this time for assault charges. She pleaded guilty to assaulting a prison employee behind bars. This added a further 38 months to 5 years on top of her 2 life sentences. Yikes. That wraps up the case of Mitchelle Blair. It's by far the most disturbing case I've looked at yet. How anyone could put children through this sort of pain, never mind their own flesh and blood, is beyond me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any suggestions on cases you want me to cover next, let me know in the comments. Take care. See you in the next one.